Welcome to the Freedom Legal Podcast, where you can come to liberate your lifestyle, liberate your practice, and liberate your relationships. We deliver the most up-to-date insights into the most effective and efficient lifestyle designs, business plans, marketing plans, automation software, and delegation strategies for solo practice lawyers and attorneys. Here is your host, experienced lawyer, writer, and entrepreneur, Jonathan Jaussi.
Welcome to the Freedom Legal Podcast, where we come to liberate our lifestyle, our practice, and our relationships. I'm attorney Jonathan Jaussi, and I'll be your host today. So glad you've tuned in. I'd like you to hit that like and subscribe button down below, and as well as make some comments of other topics you think we might cover, or if you have ideas on these topics you think we could share that would be a benefit to others, we'd love to hear that. Today's guest is Marco Brown. Marco grew up in a small Alaskan village called Cold Bay. The population was 85, and his dad managed a salmon hatchery, and his mom was an air traffic controller. After moving to Anchorage and attending high school, he left early to get his GED before eventually making his way to Brigham Young University, where he studied psychology. Marco graduated with distinction from the University of Nebraska School of Law and then clerked with the 3rd Judicial District in Iowa. He worked for the second largest law firm in New Mexico before moving to Utah in 2010 so his wife could study for her doctorate in vocal performance at the University of Utah. Marco now owns Brown Law, a Salt Lake-based law firm that focuses exclusively on divorce. Brown Law is the only divorce firm in Utah that offers flat fees through the entire litigation process. Marco is an adoptive father, and he and his wife just had their first biological child at 41. Marco got to name his new boy, because his wife named the first one, and as only good lawyer and member of the Federalist Society would do, he named him Antonin. To deal with his job, Marco travels. His travels usually take him to Italy, but he recently spent Christmas in Argentina eating steak. I'm glad to have Marco on board, and I welcome him here to the program and the podcast. I'm very glad to have with me Marco Brown, who is going to join us today talking about the issue of getting paid for what we do. Such an interesting topic here, so basic that it almost kind of goes without saying that you need to get paid. And I remember sitting in a group full of law students. Some of you have heard me tell this story before. We were in a seminar class talking about practice management, and the teacher asked why billing and sales was so important, and the whole class just kind of stopped and looked at her in confusion. I slowly raised my hand and shared with the teacher my thought on it, even though I was hesitant to do so, that, hey, well, we got to eat. And luckily that was the right answer. That's what she was looking for. We do have to eat. As professionals, we're not just there to serve. We're not just there to give and to help other people with their problems, but we need to be paid for what we do. So this idea of pricing ourselves right, of knowing how to collect value for what we do is so critical. Marco, I know that you've made a number of presentations on this, and this is an area you're passionate about. Why do you think it is so hard for attorneys to stand for their value sometimes? We stand so strong for everybody else. Why not us?
I think it comes down to a couple different teachings from a couple different sources. So we're taught initially in law school, and probably even before that, but especially in law school by our teachers who are law professors who are essentially bureaucrats, that getting paid is not our number one job, that doing good is our number one job. I don't know exactly what that means, but I heard it in law school. That's kind of the mantra. So we're taught that by the first group of people who really get their hooks into us as lawyers. And then once we graduate from law school and we become lawyers, we're then told by another set of bureaucrats, the bar associations, our bar associations, that the best thing we can do is to give away our time and our talents for free by doing pro bono work. Because almost every bar association I've ever interacted with or I've ever heard of, that's their number one thing that they talk to attorneys about is pro bono this and pro bono that. Not how do you make money for your family? How do you live a better life? How do you do this and that? It's, hey, give time away for free. So those are the two groups that rule over us and teach us essentially that getting paid is not our number one job. It's in fact kind of an anathema to being a good attorney in cases.
I think so, and I hear a lot of that mantra at CLEs, just stuff that is spoken publicly in the profession, that this is part of our civic duty. And I think to the extent we can help, it is, but I don't have a quarrel with it being part of our civic duty or part of the good that we owe to the world. I have a quarrel with it being ordered in the hierarchy that it is. That
Yes.
My dad used to joke with me. He practiced law for 40 years before he retired about 5 years ago. He used to joke with me that civil procedure rule number one is the lawyer gets paid. You know, and I think that we've come to a point where we're a little disconnected from that. There's this presumption that we'll just figure that part out, and some practitioners just don't. So there's definitely, like you say, there's the institutional barriers that we face, law school, the bar at large. I think also one of the things I've seen, I don't know if this is your perspective, but one of the things I've seen is that it almost seems kind of sleazy for an attorney to talk about getting paid, that it's beneath us, that ought to just kind of function in the background. Have you had any experience with that or anything like that?
I think so. I think attorneys tend to view themselves, and this is self-imposed. So we tend to view ourselves as craftsmen, more kind of leather workers than widget makers. And a craftsman cares about his craft more than he cares about getting paid for his craft. And that's kind of what we're taught. But that's entirely wrong. You can get paid well as a craftsman, but we just don't tend to see it that way as attorneys. And I think it's this old idea that being an attorney is an honorable profession, which it is, but it's a profession. It's that same kind of mentality that pervaded being an attorney up until, what was it, the 70s and 80s? We couldn't even advertise because advertising was beneath us because we were going after money. Well, of course we're going after money. We've always gone after money. But that was the mentality back then. Of course, it's this kind of top-down idea. All the guys that had all the networks and all the money told all the other attorneys that they couldn't advertise because that would bust up their market share. So it was always about money, but it was always kind of underneath or sub rosa. And now I think we just need to accept the fact that getting paid is our number one job. And that is not anathema to helping our clients, but that is absolutely integral to helping our clients. If we don't get paid, then we are not serving our clients well because we're going to burn out. If we don't get paid, we're not going to be attorneys for very long. And while we're attorneys, we're going to be really terrible attorneys because not getting paid has all sorts of horrible bad effects on us, and it has all sorts of bad effects on our law firms as well. So we're not effective attorneys. And then after a few years, we're just going to completely burn out and not serve anybody as attorneys.
Yeah, and I think about that. Let's talk about some of those negatives, because I know for me, if you were to have approached me as a young attorney, I was convinced that I was going to be able to make money no matter what, that, you know, the clients would just, it's almost like when you meet that client who's just convinced that they're going to walk into the courtroom and just based on the righteousness of their story, the judge is going to immediately side with them without even hearing the other side. And you have to prep them that this is a process of mutuality and of truth finding that the judge is going to go through. So similarly, I think as a young attorney, if you were to have approached me saying, hey, you've got to be focused on earning money and being financially successful as a business person, I might have looked at you askance and said, like, I don't really think that's part of what I do. So I think some of the negatives that you mentioned there that I experienced was the idea of resenting my clients. You know, if you're not being paid well, if you have not stated your value really clearly and stated the expectation in an unflinching way with the clients, they will, just as is human nature, begin to challenge that value. They'll begin to challenge whether or not they should be paying so much. And they'll also begin to have expectations that maybe that are not fair of you as a practitioner, expecting you to control variables that you cannot control, expecting you to get outcomes that really aren't within the realm of possibilities. And I'm wondering if maybe you could elaborate on your experience with that and some of the other challenges that you think attorneys may begin to see or may be experiencing if they don't manage this part of their practice.
Okay, I think there were a couple parts there. So there's the management of expectation part. I'm going to talk first about
Mm-hmm.
the idea that you can come out of law school and just find clients. Okay, so this is another place where law schools really kind of fall down on the job, is in the sense that they teach you how to talk and think like a lawyer. They do not, however, teach you how to acquire clients so you can be a lawyer. So that's really, really difficult. And those are skills that need to be picked up, but those are skills that are separate and apart from law school. So you need to, those are sales skills, those are closing skills. Those are things that people need to read about. We need to find books. We need to really practice those things, because it does not come easy unless you have a ready-made law firm that is going to give you all of your clients. And those are few and far between and getting less and less in this modern era of lawyering. Then you need to figure that out yourself as a lawyer, and especially as a young lawyer. And a part of this, part of sales, is showing what your value is. Because to get somebody to hire you, you need to be able to say, this is my value, tick, 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 and tick all these things off, and then close the deal. And to get to your point about managing expectations and managing value, that's a continual process while you have a client, because initially you can close them, but then you need to remind them all the time, this is what I'm doing, this is my value set, this is why you hired me, these are the things that are going to happen. So it's really managing of expectations and managing of value. But again, that's a learned skill that is not taught, and we need to really look at it and try to develop that skill as attorneys.
I think so. And one of the things you mentioned, I think it's worth going over a little bit more, this idea of not just selling the client, but making sure the client stays sold.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed two different pieces in that continuum as it goes along that are important. One is that this idea of, who's a client and who's not. And I've talked about this before in some of my other podcasts, that sometimes somebody is just not a good candidate. There are things to look for there. People who have a deep and abiding distrust for the legal system, people who just really can't accept the fact that you cost as much as you do. These people are going to continue to challenge you. And again, this is something I've learned, is that the moment when somebody walks into your office with a legal problem, that is the very most motivated that person is. If they're not willing to pay you there at that point, it's not going to, turn around and just change. That's their mindset. That's their come from. So we need to make sure that we're taking in people that are really ready to be clients the way we need them to be clients, so that we can show up for them. And I think that's kind of what I mentioned earlier about the idea of resenting our clients. I don't think many attorneys would actually admit this, but if a client's not paying you well, or if the client's constantly challenging your value and being irritating, you're going to come to resent them. You're not going to want to work for them. And I don't think we would consciously do less than our best for a client, but it sure makes it more difficult to put our best foot forward. So there's one concept I think is really important at the very beginning, making sure that you just are unflinching about your value. And if you need to adjust prices, you need to adjust them. But when you state a price for what you do, that needs to be really, really firm. And I think that we need to have solid intention there, because knowing full well that some of our clients are going to challenge us, and we need to stand firm and say, this is what I'm worth, this is what I charge. And if you get the objection, well, I could find it cheaper down the road, well, then go down the road and go find it. I'm looking for people that I could show high value to, and they should show high value back. That's the beginning. Then down the road, continuing to show value in yourself and show value for your client when they challenge you, as is human nature, they will from time to time. Continuing to show high value there and making sure they stay sold. So how is it, what are some tips for some of our viewers there that you've experienced? How do you keep the client sold, making sure that they still feel as excited to work with you as they did at the very beginning when they thought you were going to solve all of their problems?
Exactly. So that expectation, not telling them you're going to solve all their problems is the first thing, right? So managing that expectation up front while building your own value. Now keep this in mind, price is a myth. People pay prices for things they think are going to solve their problems. So it's your job as an attorney to build the value up to what you pay. That is on you. That's not on them. If they don't like your price, then it's because you haven't built the value. Don't blame them. Build the value more and people will pay you more. Now, I think the best way to keep people sold is the best way to keep them happy as clients. And what we found in what we do is communication. Constant systemic communication is the thing that keeps people the happiest throughout their cases. So, for example, we're divorce attorneys. It's all we do is divorce. And what we found is this constant communication is the key. So what we do is every Friday, the attorneys, in addition to all the normal conversations they have, emails, phone calls, texts, whatever, on Friday they call their clients and they say, here's an update. What's going on? What can I do for you? Then on Wednesday, every Wednesday, no matter what's happened, in addition to all the normal communication, the paralegal sends out a text. Do you have any questions? What can I do for you? That has been the single biggest thing that has increased client satisfaction and increased 5-star reviews in our law firm. Now, that's a difficult thing to do if you're like a normal lawyer and you're overloaded with 90 cases. Because you can't make 90 calls on a Friday, right? So what that means is you need to decrease the number of cases that you take, which means that you need to get paid 100% for the work you do. Otherwise, you can't, this math doesn't work. You can't possibly do it. So everything stems from getting paid so you can get better quality clients, so you can take fewer clients, so you can communicate better with the clients, the quality goes up, their 5-star, the 5-star reviews go up, and you can get pickier with your clients. It's all this kind of virtuous cycle.
Right. And so there is constantly that, I call it weeding the garden, right? We're constantly cultivating better and better and better clients and increasing our value in a linear sense where, I really believe our hourly rate ought to be climbing over the years. If you haven't adjusted that in 2 years, you need to look at that. Your value should be growing. You need to do that for you so that you can, with credibility, state your value to people because it's constantly going up. And, and just decide where you want to be as far as market value. I think that's another thing to be intentional as attorneys. Do we want to be on the lower end, middle end, higher end? I kind of think that we ought to be moving that needle upward while still delivering a high value for the client. I like what you said about.
Yeah, let me talk about this for just a second, because I think this is super important. And this is another sales thing. When people come in, and this is why price is a myth. When people come in and they say, oh, I can get this cheaper down the street, then the way I react to that is to say, okay, you can get it cheaper down the street, but that means that attorney doesn't value himself or herself or you nearly as much as I do, because I charge more, because I want to be able to give you the quality that's necessary. So do you want somebody who is going to give you that quality and is going to be honest with you about it and charge you for it? Or are you going to go down the street where they don't value you as much? These are different strategies for pricing and for sales. But I think that it's true. What we charge as attorneys is what we think of our own value. And if you're in the middle of the road, then you're just like everyone else. If you're on the lower end, then you don't value yourself very much and you're not going to do very good work. So get on the upper end.
Absolutely. And I think that's critical right there. And to know two things. First, of course, you ought to always be increasing your value. That's just part of your growth as a professional. You need to do that for you. And then, like you're saying, you need to be able to really be looking for the clients who are going to be a match for you. I mean, if your idea of your value is here and you find yourself straining to bring somebody up to where you are because they just don't see it subjectively, they can't value you that way, let them go. It's okay. It really is, because that battle is going to continue down the road as you have them as clients. You don't need to reach so hard. And I think this is a balance you're finding out as you practice. You don't need to reach so hard for a client. If you're trying too hard, people can feel it, and they're going to challenge you in that space. It's like the game of Red Rover you played as a little kid, where we all link arms and we're trying to run across and break through the line. you're always looking for that one place, that one person you think, I bet I can crack the line there. And whether we like to admit it or not, as human beings, we do this. We challenge people, especially strong people like attorneys. We challenge them. We want to see, do they really have their mettle? Do they have what it takes to be strong for me, to advocate for me? And so I think as attorneys, we need to get comfortable with the fact that people are going to challenge our value. Doesn't mean we're doing anything wrong. It means that that's part of a human experience. It may be part of, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grieving. We got to go through shock, anger, denial, that we're hiring a lawyer. We need to go through bargaining. Okay, you say you're $300 an hour. Will you take $200? That's going to happen. So it doesn't mean you've done anything wrong as an attorney if people are challenging your value. But if people are challenging your value all the time, that's a flag post on your road that you need to listen to. You need to listen to that and say, okay, how am I presenting? Am I presenting with value when I talk with people? Or am I presenting with somebody who's not quite sure of their value? So I like that you mentioned that not only do I value my clients this high, I value me this high, and this is the value I want to deliver. I don't want to race towards the bottom. And that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, you never want to decrease price, because again, price is a myth, and that's the lowest. You become the lowest common denominator if you decrease price. What you should do is increase value. And if you don't know how to do that, if you don't know what your unique selling proposition is, and you should probably have 3 of them, if you don't know one of them, figure it out. Right, become different in the marketplace and increase your value. Never decrease price.
I agree. And the reason this is so important in my perspective, and I want to hear yours as well on this, because I can tell that you're really passionate about attorneys getting paid for what they do. And I believe that too, because look, if I think there's a risk that somebody's not going to pay me, I just don't
get out.
Get them out. Yeah, exactly. You don't need it. I mean, if we were working any other job and we thought the company was had instability or was going to fold up and not pay our last couple of paychecks, we'd be out. It would just be what we would do.
It does. And again, if we don't get paid for what we do, you can't create a space, because you have to work ever harder and ever more hours to create what would be a normal lifestyle, right? So again, getting paid, doing it efficiently, working with the people you want to work with, it just decreases all of that stress and allows you to make time and get away.
So last piece here I want to ask you about, I think about famous people as I think about attorneys, because in my book, we're all rock stars. You go into a situation that, but for us being there, would turn out really badly for these people. So I do believe that as attorneys, we add huge value to their world. I'm thinking about the mixed martial arts star, Ronda Rousey. She was kind of on the top of her game. If you remember hearing any of the news stories about her, this is a person who kind of rose to fame pretty quickly, and in my opinion, didn't handle the power well. She was very mouthy, incredibly bombastic, and she had finally her title match with Heidi Holm, who was just kind of humble. She was good. She'd been around for a while. She was, not really very showy. And man, she just rocked Ronda. I mean, knocked out a couple of her teeth, kicked her, knocked her out with a head kick. And I remember seeing Ronda on Ellen DeGeneres' show. And she was talking about how devastated she was by this loss, not just physically.
She was crying.
Yeah, she was absolutely bawling. And she was talking about how her teeth, like she had to have surgery on her teeth. And she was laying there in the hospital bed saying, if I'm not this, meaning the champion, right? If I'm not this, what am I? And I like literally feelings of like suicidal ideation. Like I need to die. And then looking up and seeing this boyfriend of hers who was standing over her that she loves so much saying, well, I need to stay on the planet. I need to have his babies. And of course the audience laughs at this moment. It's a comedic moment, and it's an identifiable moment. But I think about that. I think as attorneys, we go through this process where we associate with stress. We associate with the rise of being the champion. and the value and the thing, how we're being paid for that, whether it be in dollars, in feelings of importance, feelings of meaning in what we're doing, that we're doing something meaningful in the world, feelings that we have a challenge to do something that really actually challenges us to our core, where we have to reach deep and really go for that inner champion in us. There's a time where every one of us is going to get knocked off our horse, where we're going to be beaten. And even if we've done everything the way we should, I think if we over-identify with that role of champion, there is a risk that we find ourselves sitting there saying, if I'm not this, what am I? What have I got left? And I've seen that, as I've seen a lot of people go through the stress in this career, where maybe they do start to exhibit some unhealthy behaviors. They start to get a little self-destructive. You could see them beginning to disassociate with the meaning of what got them into the practice in the first place. And I think it's really important when you look at the Ronda Rousey story, what grounded her back down was a relationship. It was somebody that she cared about. And if our audience thinks about that, you got to think about the fact that every one of us have got people that we care about. And we've got the hope of having people come into our lives that we're going to care about a lot. And we need to stay grounded in those things, because we are going to get knocked off our horse. We are going to get knocked down from time to time in the practice of law. It's the nature of the business. You know, we're kind of boxers. We can't expect not to be hit or even knocked out from time to time. It happens. It's the nature of the business. So what are your thoughts about people that maybe at this time, members of our audience who might have gone through a defeat they didn't anticipate, or having gone through a defeat they anticipated but didn't anticipate it hurting as bad as it did, or it affecting their value as much as it might have done?
It's a good question. I know that I've gone through that. I've gone through periods where I win cases, I win trials, and I feel great, and I make lots of money, and that feels good as well. You help lots of people, and that feels good. And then there are those times when you just get the crap kicked out of you, and that feels terrible. I don't know how to answer that other than you need to persevere. I've had times where I wanted to quit. I've had times where I wanted to quit, consistently. But for me, it was, look, I have a family, and this is what I'm made for. That thankfully, I'm kind of made for one thing, and it's to be a lawyer. So I know that I'm not going anywhere else. And if I go somewhere else, I have to work for somebody, and I don't get along well with others in that way. So I'm not going to be an employee. So I have to do this. I just have to make it work. And it's just that straight persistence. You just have to realize that it's going to happen to you, and you stick with it. I don't know any better way to say it. It's very much kind of a Jocko Willink sort of thing. Just get through it. Just bust on through. And it's always better on the other side, because you realize that bad things happen, but that's okay. They're going to happen, and you're going to get back up. And as long as you're really trying hard to be the best attorney and you can, and to increase your skills, then those times are going to be fewer and fewer in the future.
Absolutely. And I think even when they do sneak up on you and they catch you a bad time that really challenges your value, that really hits you in the teeth, and you're reeling, wondering, gosh, maybe I'm not the success I thought I was. If you have those thoughts, if you have those human moments where you doubt yourself a little bit and you wonder, gosh, if I'm not this, what am I? Remember that it is those key relationships that we have in our life. That's why we do what we do. Our relationships with those that we love, our relationship with us, ourselves, our relationship with the clients that we want to make a difference for. And that's really why we're there, as well as to take care of ourselves. So, well, thank you, Marco. I really appreciate your time here, and I know our listeners do as well. Really grateful that you've been here with us, sharing some of your expertise on getting paid and taking care of yourself as a practitioner.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
Thank you for tuning in to Freedom Legal. We're glad that you were here with us. We again invite you to subscribe to the podcast and share this with your friends in the profession. And feel free to make comments as to topics you think we could cover and ideas that need to be shared here, and we'll be happy to incorporate them as we can. Talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Freedom Legal Podcast. Please visit the podcast website to submit your questions and feedback. Let us help you liberate your lifestyle, liberate your practice, and liberate your relationships. We'll see you next time.